Thank you, Sarah, and thank you to Kean University's Holocaust Council Research Center for inviting me, as well as St. Elizabeth University. So I'm delighted to be here and to be speaking with teachers. And I heard her say the title of the presentation, and I thought, oh, that's just a little bit of information to convey in 90 minutes. So because we're working with teachers here, we're going to really focus on providing you with resources to talk about some of the group of Jews affected by the Holocaust that aren't always talked about, often not talked about at all when teaching about the Holocaust, and that is Sephardic Jews in the Balkans. So I'm going to talk about a few things. I'm going to start by sharing my screen. I'm basically going to try and cover about 4 to 5 stories tonight. Centropa is a storytelling organization. I work for Centropa. I'm the U.S. Education Director of Centropa. And I'm going to tell you about who we are. I can tell you the story of Centropa. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Sephardic Jews, where they came from, and give you some material that you can share with your students to give some of that historical context. I'm going to show you one of Centropa's stories about Sephardic Jews of a family that we interviewed. And so you get a sense of the films that we have that you can use in your classroom. We're going to talk a little bit about Bulgaria and the Holocaust. And we're also going to talk about a little bit about how Holocaust survivors and their children responded to the Bosnian War of the 1990s and really invited their community, Muslims, Catholic Croats, Orthodox Serbs, into their synagogue to help each other survive the war. So that's a big agenda for tonight, and I'm going to kind of go quickly. I'll try not to talk too quickly. But let's get started. I want to share with you something about Centropa. I want to give you a little context so you understand who we are, what you can do with our resources, because it's what we have for you to use in the classroom is far greater than what you'll see here tonight. So I'm going to, here, I'll share that with you. I think that'll work. Right? Okay, so you see the Centropa website, I think. So Centropa is an organization based in Vienna, Austria. We interviewed over 1,200 elderly Jews in 15 Central and Eastern European countries. The Baltics, the former Austro-Hungarian Empire, the Balkans, Greece, and Turkey. What makes our archive different than many others related to the Holocaust is that we did not use video, and we did not focus only on the Holocaust. We asked people in all of these countries to tell us their entire life story as they showed us their old family photographs. So we have a digital record, a digital photographic record of Jewish life from the end of the Austro-Hungarian Empire through the first decade of the 21st century, which is pretty unique. And also wonderful because 21st century students are very image oriented, right? It's really their lingua franca to talk through images. So I'm going to quickly show you some of the features of the website so you have a sense and can use it in your classroom. That's a very important goal of mine tonight, that you go back to your classes able to use the resources that we offer, as well as having resources to the specific topic of tonight's discussion. The first thing I want to show you is that we have these country pages, and the country pages that we are really intended for the teachers that we work in this country. We work with teachers in Europe, Israel, and the United States. And these are really intended for them, but particularly if you teach high school and you want to give out a research project, I like showing this to teachers in the US because all of the photos that we digitized from Serbia are here, and here are the biographies that are translated into English. We did over 1,200 interviews. About somewhere between 700 and 800 are translated into English. So you could never get through all of them. There's quite enough material for you to use. But I love showing this because it's just an easy way to set up a project. If you have students covering different countries, you just send them to the country page. We do have a US page, but we didn't do interviews in the US. We didn't do interviews really in many other places. We did a couple of interviews in Israel because we work in Israel and we wanted stories that were a little bit relevant for Israeli students. We also have education resources according to the country, right? So we have lesson plans using our Serbian stories, 19 lesson plans using our Serbian stories, 5 films, exhibitions, not here in the US, unfortunately, we have them in Europe, and 1 thematic website. So that's 1 resource for you. The next thing I wanted to show you was I wanted to show you the photo search. And I was practicing before we came here because sometimes the website's a little slow because we have so much information. So I pulled it up here. But if you clicked on, if you go here, if you go to the archive and you go to photo search, you're going to get this page. And the reason I want to take a minute to show you is because the search engine in our relatively new website, it's about a year and a half old, is really fantastic. First of all, if you wanted to search, say, Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year, or Bar Mitzvah, or Kristallnacht, you just type the text in here and it'll bring up all the photos we have that have a description with that word in it. It's really useful if you wanted to make maybe a gallery wall, which I've done before. I also wanted to show you that you could search by country. So usually, you know, it's not unusual to talk about Poland when you teach about the Holocaust. So you can pull up photos from Poland. So you see we have about 1,227. Just so you know, that's the number of photos we have with descriptions translated into English. Of course, we did all of our interviews in the language of the home country. So these are the images. I always call them photos, but in fact, there are documents as well that we've digitized. But you can see with the photos, for example, they're very much, they're like the selfies we have in our phones, or they're portrait photographs, or family photographs, or vacation photographs, or photographs of being in the army, or or holidays, whatever. So they're just average photos that anyone might have. Here's one from school. So I'm clicking on this photograph so you can see what happens. Well, I did click on it, but it didn't. But I'm glad it didn't move because I wanted to show you this first. I forgot to do this. I want to show you our search engine, and I'm going to pick, you can pick, these categories usually have subcategories, and this is the number of photos from Poland that we have if you were to click on this. So now we're going to bring up all the Friends Together photos from Poland. Now you certainly could do this for all of our photos. That would be fine too, but since I selected Poland, that's what's here. So I'm going to click here. And so you can see what a photo looks like, a photo page looks like. You can print the photos to do a gallery walk or whatever you want. You can print QR codes, which I've done before. You can see that underneath each photo, there's a description, and descriptions vary. They could be, they can go into the description of who's in the photo. They could be a little bit about where they are. The descriptions vary, but they're often a very nice slice of life that you wouldn't otherwise know. Below all of that are the rest of the photos from that interview. Here's a little bit of background about the interview, and this would take you to the interview itself, and you can see this is in English. A couple of key things. Again, you can generate a QR code, print a PDF of this, or share a link. But for those of you who might teach younger students, these are useful. Most of our interviews have these hyperlinks that take you to certain parts of the interview, so that if you needed to, you can see how long the interview is. They're quite long because we went back many weeks, several weeks to ask questions. And so the interviews were long. And by the way, one of the reasons we didn't use video to get their stories was precisely because the man who started Centropa and is director, he says he had worked for ABC News Nightline, and he said, when you wake up at 3 in the morning after you've done the interview and you think of the best question ever, you can't go put it back into the videotape, but you can go put it back into a translation of a transcript. So that was one reason we didn't use videotape. He just didn't like it, but it's quite long, and you could divide up one interview among 3 students, and they can each take a pre-war, during the war, post-war, and do a project about that person. The interviews have glossaries so that there's a particular event or word that's not really translatable. It's there for the students to quickly understand. And as you can see, all the photos are here on the side, and all the photos are there on the side. I'm going to keep moving along. And Sarah, maybe if there are any questions along the way, you can, I don't mind if you interrupt me, if that's okay. So if you want to put them in the chat, and then Sarah can ask me the question, that would be great. I want to show you then what we started to do. We started to make short multimedia films, of which I will show you today. And this page divides them up by region. I think it's the easiest way to search them, but we do have other ways to search them by topic, by greatest hits. That's our page where it says, if you're looking for a story that talks about a righteous Gentile, here are some examples. So, or you could go to the page with all the films. But as you can see, all of the films, they have an audio track and they have a subtitle track. Some of them are narrated in English, but most are narrated in the original language. This would be Turkish, and then have English subtitles. So if you click on this, that's the version that will come up. This is LAD for Ladino, which we'll learn a little bit about. It's the language of Sephardic Jews, partly Hebrew, partly Arabic. So this is our film collection, and we have two types of films. We have a personal story film. We're going to be watching this one today. We have personal story films, and we have what I call documentary films. Again, you can generate a QR code, you can share it, you can stream them from here, but you can also download them. Just so you know, if you do download it, this will be narrated in Serbian because that's the language of the people we interviewed. But you do need to click on this to pull up the correct version if you're going to download it. So that now that would download properly. We also have study guides, which depend, these topics, these tabs are dependent on the topic of the film. So, for example, if you don't know much about Yugoslavia, the former Yugoslavia, the establishment of it, or Jews in Yugoslavia, these will be links to short articles on the web that would give you some information about that. And those are the films. I want to go next to thematic websites. Well, I will say this, we collected lesson plans. Oh, wait, let me see something here. Oh, I forgot to tell you this part, sorry. We collected lesson plans from our teachers. We don't have a box curriculum at Centropa. And for a variety of reasons, but we do collect the best lessons from the teachers who use our resources, and we upload them for teachers to use. So we have a page where you can search for them, but at the bottom of every film, you will find the lessons that use that film, and here you can just preview them or download them here. Most of them are in English, some of them are in the language of wherever the teacher lives, but many of them are in English, and you can find all of the lessons plans here, and you can search on that page according to grade level or topic. And we're working on a system where you can search according to like event, a Holocaust event or things like that, that they hadn't put that in. I do want to show you the thematic websites because the real strength of Centropa is we don't have a box curriculum, the real strength of Centropa is that we have this open source database for you to use and create your own lessons that you need for your curriculum and your students. But it's also the limitation because we know you have limited time. So we've started curating according to topic. So for example, we have this one about Kristallnacht. In Europe, they refer to as the November pogrom. And I'm just going to use the tab that I pulled it up on. On this page, it comes up actually in German usually. So you'll see an EN here, just click there. It was sponsored by Austrian organizations, which is why when you get to the homepage of it, it's in German, but there'll be an EN here. You just click on that. And basically what we've done is we've pulled together excerpts from our interviews in Vienna about what Kristallnacht was like in Vienna for them. And they're short, easy to use. You could create a fantastic lesson out of these. I think there are 12 of them here. We brought all the films that talk about our stories that have mentions of Kristallnacht in them or refer to Kristallnacht or the person lived through Kristallnacht. They're on this site. And then each of our websites has a special feature. So for this one, my colleagues put together a timeline of the events in Austria, beginning in early 1938, the tensions in the Austrian government between the National Socialists and the Austrian nationalists. And so this is the timeline of how the government was basically overthrown leading up until the Anschluss. But what I really like about what they did here is that on the left, you'll see what's happening in Austria or in Vienna. And here you'll have an excerpt from a Centropa interview that refers to that actual event. And these audios are in German, so if anyone speaks German, you can listen to them in the original. We also, I'm going to just move on because of time, but I do want you to know about our latest feature, which is podcasts. We started creating podcasts, which are a lot like audio theater. They're not interviews, they're not people talking. They're readings out of they're excerpts being read by actors and actresses, but also telling the stories of our interviewees using sound. So for example, this might be something you might use if you're going to be talking about Sephardic Jews. You'll see each of these excerpts being read is about 15 minutes long. There's always an introduction to each series, and there's sometimes added extra features, like in this case, there's an excerpt from a book called Getzenmeyer by I think he's Serbian. I can't remember. David Albahari. I can't remember if he's Bosnian, Croatian, or Serbian. It might be Croatian. But he wrote this amazing book, Getzenmeyer, about two Nazis who were running the gas vans in Croatia. It must have been Croatia. Anyway, here's an excerpt read from that. But mostly what you would probably want to use it for are these 12 to 15 minute stories about being read in the first person about people's experiences, and they have audio to accompany it, so you might hear the sound of a tram or a typewriter. So they're very, very interesting, really different kind of resource for you to teach about the topic. So that's a really quick, fast overview of what Centropa has to offer you. I'd love for you to keep that in mind, and I'm always happy to answer questions. And I'm going to put my, I'm going to see, let's see, I'm trying to do 42 things at once. I'm going to put my, I can't see, hold on one second, I'm sorry. Let's see, I'm going to put my email and also Centropa's website in the chat. Now, let's get to our topic. Let me see here. I want to do this. Yeah, so I want to start with, I know I'm not, so I want to talk about who are the Sephardic Jews and why learn about them. One of the things I want to suggest is that the Jewish population of Yugoslavia in 1941 was about 82,000, and 80% of the Yugoslavian Jewish community was murdered during the Holocaust. In Greece, it was about the same number. So these are not small numbers of Jews who were murdered and suffered during the Holocaust. And I know there's such a tendency to focus on what happened in Germany, as we should, and Poland, as we should. But these are really amazing stories and important stories to include. I also think including diversity is a useful idea. One of the things I try and stress, and again, I just did a very quick overview of Centropa, but is the diversity of Jewish life pre-war and of the Jews that were murdered. If you want to combat the stereotypes and the propaganda that the Nazis put forth, there's nothing like showing them a real diversity of Jewish life, socioeconomic diversity, cultural diversity, religious diversity, etc. So I think there are quite a few reasons for us to take a minute to learn a little bit about this group of people. I'm going to start by showing you a little bit of a history of Jews in the Balkans. And let me just get out of, oh, you know what? I think you didn't even see my PowerPoint. Oh, I'm sorry. It's hard to talk and do this at the same time. But I want to show you, we're going to start by showing you a film that's going to give you some background about the Sephardic Jews in the Balkans, how they got there, who the Sephardic Jews are. Jews got to the Iberian Peninsula. Sephardic Jews are Jews whose families' ancestors were originally from Spain, and they got to Spain during the Roman Empire. As Romans were building the roads, many people from the Middle East went west, and the Jews were among them, settling in the Iberian Peninsula. And in the Iberian Peninsula, they certainly lived under Catholic rule, but they also lived under the Muslims. And there were periods of time where they got along. Christians, Muslims, Jews got along from about 711 or so CE to about, I think, 1100 or so. They got along fairly well. And there was a lot of cross-cultural exchange between Muslims, Christians, and Jews. The Arabs were translating the Greek humanists into Arabic, and there was a lot of literary exchange and openness to science and things like that. So there's a real memory among Jews, particularly Sephardic Jews, of getting along with these other cultures. It wasn't always the case. I want to be clear. In fact, under the Muslims, Jews had what was considered a protected status, as did Christians. They lived under what was called a dhimmi status, and it meant that they were second-class citizens. Islam recognized that they were part of the people of the book, but they also wanted to make sure that it was clear that Islam was the true religion. So there were often many rules about how high they could build their synagogues or churches, or what they had to wear, or certain things they could say or not say around Muslims, or inviting Muslims to their homes, things like this. So it's not true to say that there was no discrimination among Muslims. In fact, that dhimmi status and the severity with which it was enforced often depended on the fanaticism of whatever Muslim rulers existed. And I'm giving you just a very broad overview now, but that's basically how it works. So the more fanatical they were, the more the Christians and Jews were, under the thumb of that dhimmi status. And the more lenient, the less they were, and people got along. But you're going to see that the Sephardic Jews, unlike Jews in Northern European countries, who really lived under what one historian called the demonization of Jews by Christians, because of that idea that Jews killed Jesus and all of the myths that came about of Jews started the Black Plague or killed Christian children to use their blood for matzah, these things which were not true, just to be clear. This demonization of Jews that happened under Christianity, it did not happen quite that way under the Muslims. And there were other values, differences in values between sort of Catholic culture and Muslim culture, which you'll see a little bit in this film I'm about to show. So this film will give you an opportunity. It's an 11-minute film. It'll give you something to share with your students that gives them a sense of who the Sephardic Jews were, how they got to the Balkans, how they were welcomed there. And the film itself goes through the Holocaust and up to this story of the Bosnian War. And I'm going to let it go all the way to the end, because we are going to be short on time, I'm sure of it. And I want you to know a little bit about that story. That's one of the stories of civil society standing up. And we'll refer to that at the very end of today's presentation. So are there any questions yet? I'm assuming not. I assume you'll say so. Okay.
Not yet.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. So I'm going to share my screen again and make sure I can. There we go. All right. So.
(1492) Un camino diferente. No hay muchos de nosotros que no conozcamos esta fecha, 1492. Fue el 3 de agosto de ese año cuando este hombre, Cristóbal Colón, salió en busca de una ruta comercial hacia el oriente. Sabemos que encontró algo más: el hemisferio occidental. Nuestra tarea no es hablar de lo malo y lo bueno que surgió con el descubrimiento que España llamó el Nuevo Mundo. Pero podemos decir que la razón por la cual hoy en día muchos de nosotros hablamos español se debe a este viaje. Pero hay algo que probablemente no saben. La misma semana en que Colón zarpó del puerto de Palos en España, alrededor de 200,000 españoles fueron expulsados del país simplemente por su religión. No eran católicos como la reina Isabel y el rey Fernando. Eran judíos que habían formado parte de la sociedad española durante 1000 años. Así que en la misma semana en la que Colón navegó hacia el oeste para traer la lengua que hablamos hoy en día, las familias judías de España huyeron hacia muchas direcciones: a Portugal, a Holanda y a muchos otros lugares. Pero la mayoría de estos españoles navegaron hacia el este, cruzando el Mediterráneo. ¿Y quién les dio la bienvenida a estos refugiados provenientes de la España católica intolerante? Los musulmanes. Este es un retrato del sultán turco otomano Beyazid II, quien gobernó un imperio que se extendió por todo el Mediterráneo, hasta la península balcánica. El sultán dio la bienvenida a los judíos y más de 150,000 poblaron estas tierras. Desde Estambul hasta Sarajevo, en ciudades como Tesalónica en Grecia, Bitola en la actual Macedonia, Sofía en Bulgaria, Belgrado en Serbia, el hermoso puerto de Dubrovnik en Croacia, y aquí en Sarajevo, en Bosnia y Herzegovina. Durante 450 años, desde 1492 hasta 1941, estos judíos vivieron entre musulmanes y cristianos, entre católicos y ortodoxos. Estos judíos españoles siempre serán conocidos como los sefardíes, y sefarad en hebreo significa España. Ellos mantuvieron la lengua que habían traído de España, ladino o judeo-español. Aquí escuchamos a un orador ladino diciendo: el lenguaje ladino es en su mayoría español, con algunas palabras hebreas y otras palabras mezcladas.
Al mismo tiempo, los sefaradim, tanto en Andalucía como después en el Imperio Otomán, vivían en un país, en una cultura, en una sociedad multifacetal, multiconfesional, multiétnica, muchísimo más parecida a la nuestra.
Pero básicamente, si eres español, puedes entender ladino, ¿cierto? Se vestían con la ropa tradicional que habían traído de su tierra natal. Y cantaban sobre su amor hacia la tierra que los expulsó, porque nunca perdieron el amor por ella. Estos judíos españoles practicaron los oficios en los cuales se habían especializado en España. Eran doctores, farmacéuticos, comerciantes, abarroteros, hojalateros y talabarteros. Estos judíos españoles vivieron en la península balcánica mientras surgían imperios que después se terminaron, y permanecieron ahí conforme las fronteras cambiaron y los antiguos países volvieron a hacerse nuevos otra vez. Y un país completamente nuevo, Yugoslavia, surgió en 1918 después del final de la Primera Guerra Mundial. Estos judíos sefardíes sentían amor por su patria, pero también se sentían parte de las sociedades balcánicas. Pero había otros que no sentían lo mismo. Esta gente quería ver muertos a todos los judíos, a las mujeres, los niños y los ancianos. Todo empezó en abril de 1941. La Alemania nazi invadió Yugoslavia y la dividió. Los nazis pronto tomaron Grecia también. Más de 100,000 judíos de habla hispana en la península balcánica fueron fusilados. Encerrados en camiones con cámaras de gas. Asesinados en los campos de concentración croatas. O enviados a los campos de exterminio nazis en la Polonia ocupada por Alemania. Durante la Segunda Guerra Mundial, Turquía permaneció neutral y aunque los impuestos eran muy altos en contra de los no musulmanes, estos judíos fueron perdonados. En Bulgaria, el gobierno deportó a 12,000 judíos de Macedonia y la región griega de Tracia, condenándolos así a la muerte. Pero protegió a 48,000 que vivían en Bulgaria. La Segunda Guerra Mundial terminó en 1945. ¿Y qué sucedió con el patrimonio de 450 años de los judíos sefardíes en la península balcánica? Era solo una pequeña sombra de lo que había sido. El comunismo se impuso sobre gran parte de estas tierras durante 40 años. Y luego, en 1992, la guerra comenzó otra vez. Los serbios de Bosnia les dijeron a los ciudadanos de Sarajevo lo siguiente: las personas de religiones distintas no pueden vivir juntas. Pero los judíos españoles de Sarajevo no lo aceptaron. Recordaron que sus familias fueron expulsadas de su tierra natal en 1492 y que luego el odio étnico causó la muerte de la mayoría de ellos en 1941 y 1942. Pero ahora, en 1992, en el aniversario 500 de su expulsión de España, ellos dijeron: nosotros tomamos un camino diferente. Y no es el camino del odio. Ayudaron a la ciudad entera creando una organización no sectaria de ayuda humanitaria y trabajaron en la sinagoga junto a los musulmanes y serbios ortodoxos y los croatas católicos. Después de todo, esa es la razón de las democracias. Vivir juntos, ayudar a los demás y siempre decir no a los prejuicios. Esta historia española es la que nos pertenece a todos nosotros. Es una lección que nació hace 500 años y que tenemos que seguir aprendiendo hasta hoy día.
Para amar seguro.
Anyone have any questions about that film? Okay, we'll just keep going then. So that story, as you can tell, that story sort of has a thesis, right? And the thesis is that part of what enabled the Jews of Sarajevo in 1990s to open their synagogue in an act of civil generosity to all their neighbors and work together really has to do with the long history of Sephardic Jews being welcomed into the Balkans, originally from by the Ottomans, and feeling that they were part of the larger culture. Now, you may or may not agree with that, but that is sort of the thesis of that film. It's a little bit this thesis that Centropa tends to put forward, and that might be something worth discussing with your students. So let's keep moving on. What I'd like to do now is we've sort of moved up to the 20th century because we have to, in part because of time. And what I really would like to do is a couple of things. I want to show you a story of one family from Belgrade in Serbia and their experiences during the Holocaust, and a couple of things happening with this film. First of all, I really love for you to see one of our personal story films. They're very useful. Our films the shortest one is 3 minutes and the longest is 30. So they're perfect for classroom use. They're perfect for homework. As you watch this film, but most of them do have subtitles. So as you watch this film, I'd like to recommend to teachers that you suggest this to your students, you give them one or two things to look for as they're watching a film. It's very hard for students to fill out a worksheet while they're trying to read subtitles. So as you watch this film, I'd be very interested in hearing maybe in the chat afterwards if you would use this film, how you might use this film, what themes you see in the film, because a lot of the films that we share, yes, you can teach it specifically about the history of Sephardic Jews or their experiences during the Holocaust, because Centropa really talks about what the experience of the Jews, that we don't really talk about, when the Nazis came in, or we don't have that. Some of that is in there, but it's not, we're really focused on how Jews experienced the 20th century. In fact, the entire 20th century. We feel like you can't just talk about how Jews were murdered. You have to talk about how they lived. And that's why every single one of our films starts at the beginning of someone's life, or often their parents or grandparents' lives, and goes till the end. So this film will give you that. And as you watch it, I'd like you to think about what themes do you see in this film. That might give you a little bit more wiggle room for how you use the film. And maybe even that film you just saw too. So think about what themes you see in this upcoming film and whether you'd be able to use it. And now I just want to, give me 1 second. All right, I hope you enjoy this film about the story of the Kala family from Belgrade, Serbia.
Drugi svetski rat. Nemačko ministarstvo spoljnih poslova preduzelo je specijalne mere da ne koristi reči koje bi povezale to ministarstvo sa genocidom počinjenim nad Jevrejima. Godine 1943. Nemački diplomata Franz Rademacher podneo je izveštaj troškova u vezi svog puta u Srbiju. Razlog koji je naveo je likvidacija beogradskih Jevreja. Više od 90% beogradskih Jevreja ubijano je u Holokaustu. Ovo je priča o jednoj od tih porodica. Ovo je priča o ratu i ljubavi u Srbiji i o 3 obećanja. Obećanju koje je žena dala svome mužu, obećanju koje je sveštenik dao toj ženi i njenim kćerima i obećanju koje je jedna od kćeri dala sebi. To je priča o ispunjenju tog obećanja bez obzira na opasnost i posljedice. Kćeri, Matilda i Breda, vode nas nazad u svet u kome su rođene.
Moje ime je Matilda Kalev-Čerge. Moja priča počinje kao sve dobre porodične priče, sa ljubavnom pričom mojih roditelja, o tome kako su se upoznali. 927. godine moja majka, katolkinja, Antonija Ograjenšek, dolazi iz Slovenije da poseti svoju familiju u Beogradu i tada upoznaje Avrama Kalefa, sefardskog Jevrejina. Nije joj smetalo što je bio hendikepiran i osuđen na život u invalidskim kolicima. A Avramu nije smetalo što Antonija nije bila Jevrejka. I tako 928. godine porodica iz Slovenije dolazi na venčanje Antonije i Avrama i upoznaje porodicu Kalev iz Beograda. Antonija je odlučila da pređe na judaizam i promenila je svoje ime u Dona Bat Kalev. Mladi bračni par se uselio u staru porodičnu kuću na Dorčolu u ulici Gospodar Jovanova broj 3. Kalevi su bili kao svi španski Jevreji. Proterani smo iz Španije 492. A moja familija može da isprati svoje korene u Beogradu već preko 300 godina. Evo, ova slika je pravo blago. Moja prababa Rahela Kalev, koja je rođena negde sredinom 19. veka. Rahela je imala 4 dece. Avrama, Jakova, Lenku i moju baku Matildu, po kojoj sam i ja dobila ime. Moja familija nije bila posebno bogata, ali svakako nismo bili ni siromašni. U jednom momentu imali smo čak 3 prodavnice odeće u Beogradu. Najveća je bila u Kolarčevoj ulici. Tu smo svi bili zaposleni. Avram i Vukica su prvi zasnovali porodicu. Ovo je Jakov Kalev na svom venčanju sa Lenkom Almozlino. Oni su se uselili u kuću pored naše, u Gospodar Jevremovoj broj 5. Imali su 2 sina, Davida i Mileta. Od Raheline 2 kćeri Lenka se udala za Josipa Koena. A moja baka Matilda udala se za Nisima Kalefa. Imali su 3 sina, ali eto, Nisim je preminuo vrlo mlad, a onda i njihova 2 sina. Tako da je moja baka Matilda Kalev ostala sama sa prodavnicom koju je morala da vodi sa sinom koga je podizala. Ubrzo je morala da se nosi i sa njegovom bolešću. Avram je imao dijabetes i atrofiju mišića. Ali ništa nije moglo da omete moju baku. Brinula je o domaćinstvu, radila u prodavnici, a za ručkom svi su jeli zajedno. I Slovakinja koja nam je čistila kuću, Albanka koja je prala veš, Nemica koja se brinula o ocu i čitavoj familiji koja je zaista bila mnogobrojna. To je bila moja familija. A godinu dana kasnije stigla je Breda. I nas dve smo se divno slagale. Naša jevrejska baka u Srbiji nas je obožavala kao i svi rođaci u Sloveniji. Tata je svuda išao sa nama. Iako je bio u svojim kolicima. Putovali smo po Sloveniji, Srbiji. Breda i ja išli smo u jevrejsko obdanište, a onda zajedno nastavile osnovnu školu. Kako sam volela školu i mnogo sam učila. Svakog popodneva jurila sam kući da pričam ocu o školi, o novim drugaricama. U ovom našem svetu jevrejska zajednica bila je zaista centar života. Tada je živjelo oko 10.000 Jevreja u Beogradu, od kojih su većina bili Sefardi kao mi, a negde oko 20% bilo je Aškenaza iz Severne Evrope. Imali smo omladinske klubove, imali smo škole, imali smo čak omiljenog oficira, velikog patriotu koji je služio u srpskoj vojsci u Prvom svetskom ratu. Imali smo divne sinagoge. Bila sam još devojčica i sve mi je bilo divno. Ipak počela sam da primećujem da su ljudi postajali uplašeni i nervozni. 1938. Nemci su zauzeli Austriju, zatim Čekoslovačku, a 1939. je poražena Poljska. 1940. Francuska, Belgija i Holandija su takođe bile poražene od nacista. Moj rođak Isak se pridružio Jugoslovenskoj narodnoj armiji kao i Mile. Beograd je bio pun jevrejskih porodica koje su pobegle sa severa u nadi da će ovde naći utočište. A u noći 6. aprila Nemci su bombardovali Beograd, a njihova armija je okupirala Beograd 6 dana kasnije. Ubrzo su stvari počele da bivaju sve gore i gore. Uveden je policijski čas za Jevreje koji su bili primorani da čiste ulice od ruševina. David i Mile su po ceo dan čistili ulice dok su ih Nemci nadgledali. Uveče su se vraćali kući, ali jedne večeri nije ih bilo. Njihova majka Lenka je otišla da ih traži. Otišla na mesto gde su radili, pitala Nemce za svoje sinove. Nikada ih više nije videla. Onda su odveli ujka Jakova kao Josifa Koena. U to vreme tata je bio još slabiji nego obično. Jedva je mogao da se kreće i rekao je moje majci da nas odvede negde da ćemo biti bezbedne. Onda su tata i baka, njegova majka, ostali zajedno, čekajući da im zakucaju na vrata. Dok smo se mi krile, čule smo da su odveli tatu i baku u jevrejsku bolnicu i moja majka učinila nešto neverovatno. Sa lažnim dokumentima odvela je moju sestru i mene u bolnicu. Prišla je čuvaru koji je bio Srbin i on nas je pustio unutra. Pronašli smo moga oca i moju baku. Bile smo presrećne da ih vidimo. Sećam se tada šta je tata rekao mami. Rekao je: Dona, zaštiti moju decu. Moraš da se pobrineš za njih. Hoću, rekla mu je. Obećavam. Tih dana mama je bila potpuno luda od bola i nekoliko puta je pokušavala ponovo da vidi tatu, ali to je bilo nemoguće. Jednog jutra odvela je Bredu i mene u kuću, odmah preko puta bolnice. Zamolila je nekoga da nas puste unutra kako bi mogle da virimo iza zavesa i tada smo videle smo veliki kamion. Da, kao ovaj. I tog dana, u martu 1942. ispraznili su jevrejsku bolnicu i sve ubacili u taj kamion. Tek posle smo saznali da je to bila jedna od onih zloglasnih, pokretnih, gasnih komora. Beogradska porodica Kalef polako je nestajala u nacističkoj ratnoj mašini. Odveli su stare, odveli su mlade, čitave familije. A kako je moja majka uspela da nas zaštiti kada je svet postao pakao? To će vam ispričati moja sestra.
Majka nas je odvela u crkvu na Banovom brdu, pokucala na vrata, otvorio nam je sveštenik Andrej Tumpej. On je bio Slovenac, katolik. Moja majka mu je rekla, možete li da nam pomognete? Otac Tumpej nas je pogledao i odgovorio, naravno, obećavam da ću učiniti sve što mogu da vas zaštitim. Kad smo stigli u crkvu, otac Tumpej nam je dao lažne papire. Ovo je moj. Moje je ime Rahela, postalo je Breda, a Matilda je dobila ime Lidija. Uzele smo devojačko prezime moje majke, jer ona nije bila Jevrejka. U to vreme smo se krile na tavanu. Šta je otac Tumpej tražio od nas da radimo dok smo se skrivale? Tražio nam je da pevamo. I mi smo pevale. Svakog dana dečaci koji su dolazili u crkvu i mi devojke iz crkve skupljali smo se i pevali iz sveg srca. Tako smo u stvari terali strah i zaboravljali glad. Otac Tumpej mi je jednom prilikom rekao, Breda, ti imaš divan glas i trebalo bi da postaneš pevačica. U oktobru 1944. Titovi partizani i sovjetska armija oslobodili su Beograd i mi smo mogle da se vratimo kući. Nažalost, naša kuća je bila nacionalizovana, tamo je već neko živeo i mnogo godina bilo nam je dozvoljeno da koristimo samo jedan mali deo ove kuće. Matilda i ja pokušale smo da nastavimo svoje živote. Bile smo jedine preživele iz porodice Kalef. Matilda, koja se zvala Lidija tokom rata, uzela je svoje staro ime Matilda. Oton Čerge, mladić koga je Matilda upoznala tokom rata na Banovom brdu, sada je došao da je traži. Predložio joj brak, Matilda je pristala, ali samo pod uslovom da ih oženi otac Tumpej. I otišli su čak do Bitolja u Makedoniji, gde je on bio proteran od komunista. Posle toga Matilda i Oton su zasnovali svoju porodicu i dobili kćer Editu. Nažalost, Matilda je izgubila Otona 1982. godine. Naša majka je imala 90 godina kada je dočekala da joj njena kuća u ulici Gospodar Jovanovoj srećom bude restituisana. Ja nisam mogla da odustanem od imena koje mi je dao otac Tumpej. Došla sam kod njega kao Rahela, ali kako je on mene zvao Breda, Odlučila sam da zadržim to ime. On mi je dao više nego samo ime. Dao mi je život. A šta sam ja uradila sa životom? Udala sam se za Branislava Simonovića 958. i dobila sam kćer Simonidu. 960. godine otac Tumpej se vratio u Beograd. Mi smo se viđali, pomagala sam mu novcem, ne za njega naravno, ali znala sam da mu je uvek potreban za druge. Onaj savjet koji mi je dao otac Tumpej prihvatila sam i mogu da kažem da sam zbog toga beskrajno srećna.
So, the story of the Caliphs of Belgrade, I'd love it if you put in the chat any themes that you're seeing, any of the themes that you saw in the film that you might use. In your classroom. So for example, I'll tell you some of the themes that teachers use our resources for. So love stories. One woman taught a class on love poetry, English language art teacher, love poetry, using some of our stories, not necessarily this one, but some of them, or survival, or what is the meaning of a home and homeland, or getting over hard times, for example. Yes, resilience is one that we see in pretty much all of our films, because of course we're speaking about survivors. I'm just trying to think about how we can bring these Jewish stories to different parts of our teaching, whether or not it's directly related to the Holocaust. I know teachers here are Holocaust educators. I'm not trying to take away from that, but basically, I think there are ways to bring these stories and Holocaust stories and other aspects of teaching, depending on what you teach, of course, what grades you teach. So I wanted to kind of suggest that Centropa's resources can be used for that. Life ultimately means taking the responsibility to fight the right answer to its problems and fulfill the task which it constantly sets for each individual. Thank you. The first video is great for Columbus Day, Indigenous Peoples Day, going to Native American Heritage Month. Geography, arts, culture. Okay, I just wanted to get people to think a little bit outside of the straightforward chronology, Holocaust history perspective, because I think my personal perspective as someone who works with Jewish stories from the 20th century is that there's a way to bring these into other learning experiences and classes that expands what it means to humanize Jewish people. If you work in a community where there aren't many Jewish people, or whatever prejudices people might or might not have about Jews. Okay, I'm going to keep going here a little bit. Let me just share this screen. It gets a little tricky for me because I'm using all the different pieces. Let's see here. I'm going to try this. I'm going to just okay, I want to talk a little bit about Bulgaria as promised. So in that overview of Sephardic, the history of Sephardic Jews, that 12-minute film, the one that we did originally, there were these two civic stories mentioned that are sort of in the title of tonight's presentation. One is the story of the Jews in Bulgaria, and the other one is this Sarajevo story about the Jews opening up their synagogue. And I just want to talk a little bit about what happened in Bulgaria, expand a little bit more than what was in that film. So at the end of World War I, Bulgaria fought in World War I on the side of the Central Powers, Austria-Hungary and the German Empire. And at the end, in the Treaty of Neuilly, they were in 1919, there were sanctions imposed. And so it meant that parts of Bulgaria were taken away from them. Macedonia became part of Yugoslavia, Thrace went to Greece, and there were other restrictions on Bulgaria, but this somewhat accounts, at least according to the resources I've read, somewhat accounts for Bulgaria's motivations during World War II and their alliance with Germany. But if you hear what Jews who lived in Bulgaria before the war have to say, and I took these just for transparency's sake and citation's sake, I watched a really wonderful film called The Optimists. It's from 2003, and it's about the history of Jews in Bulgaria, and particularly during the Holocaust. And these quotes were taken from there. And by all accounts, there were fairly low incidents of anti-Semitism or attitudes of anti-Semitism before the war in Bulgaria, as you can see from these quotes. And what seems to have accounted for that was Bulgarian people themselves basically were from mixed origins. They didn't have a sense of racial purity, couldn't really lay claim to some sort of racial purity. It really was an outgrowth of nationalism post-Napoleon, where so many of the nations were saying, hey, we have not only have a long history, we have a blood connection to each other. We have the same, we might have the same language, we might have the same customs and traditions and arts and all those kinds of things, folk traditions, but we also have a blood connection. So Bulgaria didn't have that quite as much as some of the other countries. Jews tended to live only in cities, not really in the provinces, so there was not a very strong sense of Jewish economic competition. However, there still were some occasional anti-Semitic outbursts. At the end of the 19th century, there was a blood libel accusation, that accusation of Jews killing Christian children for their blood to make matzah. And in early 20th century, there were some anti-Jewish riots. So King Boris III in 1935 aligned himself with Germany. And basically what starts to happen is Bulgarian anti-Jewish legislation starts to be promoted and proposed, starts to be proposed. So in 1940, the Law for the Protection of the Nation was approved. It wasn't ratified, but there started to be very clear indications that there were going to be restrictions on Jewish life based on this Law for the Protection of the Nation. And leaders started to protest and said, no, we don't want this to happen. So you can see this quote from the leading writers that sent the letter to Prime Minister. On behalf of civilization and Bulgaria's good name, we beseech you to not accept the law, the repercussions of which would put a dark stain on our legislation and leave an intolerable mark upon our memory. The doctors, the lawyers, political leaders, the Orthodox Church all stood up early on in 1940 and said, no, you can't pass this legislation. So that legislation was not ratified until January of 1941 when it was, and it did provide the basis for anti-Jewish legal measures, as you can see in my PowerPoint here. And I thought what I'd do is share you some of the interview excerpts we have from our Bulgarian interviewees. Laura Malamed from Samoko, Bulgaria, tells us, when the scary days came, other friends of my father's and some classmates of mine also came to console us, although we were afraid for our lives all the time. We really were very afraid. Germans walked around the town all the time. People shouted at us and threatened us with murder, that they would cleanse Bulgaria from the Jews and horrible things like that. The scariest thing was when a classmate of my sister's tried to kill her once. She was returning home one evening when he ran after her with a gun and tried to catch her and kill her. I remember very well how horrified she was when we came home. Then we realized that something very frightening awaited us, and our friends came secretly and told us, we'll stand by you. We will not let those horrible people hurt you. The people consoling us were Bulgarians again. So there are many testimonies like this in our interviews. I'm going to basically talk a little bit more about what happened in the ensuing years and how people stood up, but also give you a few more examples. So as the anti-Jewish the law was enforced, the Germans ultimately requested or demanded the Bulgarians release all of the Jews in their controlled territory to German custody, but they did not do that. The Germans had given, quote unquote, had handed over, annexed to Bulgaria, the Jews in Macedonia, in Thrace, and the Serbian province. And in 43, those were the Jews that Bulgaria handed over to the Germans, and those Jews were sent to Treblinka and for the most part were murdered there. However, the Jews in the core provinces of Bulgaria were not deported. They ultimately were saved, because when the threat of the deportation came, after the Jews from Macedonia and Thrace and the Serbian province were sent out, people knew that there were expected to be deportations from the core provinces of Bulgaria, but there were protests. Not only had Jews been protesting all along, but also the church protested. This very well-known important parliamentarian, Dmitry Peshev, protested. He actually was ousted from parliament as a result, but he spoke up, and he was part of the government of the king, and he spoke up. So it wasn't just what you want to call minorities protesting. These are people core to Bulgarian society who stood up. Ultimately, what happened was that as we said, the Jews within Bulgarian core provinces were not deported, but the Jews of Sofia were sent to the provinces, and many of the men were sent to forced labor. And in 1944, the Soviet army entered Sofia. Bulgaria switches alliance and declares war on Germany. So I wanted to just give you a couple more quotes or examples, primary sources, and I have them available to you to use with your students about what it was like for the Jews in this period. When we weren't allowed to go out because we were being prepared for deportation, my father went out to sit for a while in front of the door. Then a fascist-oriented neighbor hit him and ordered him to go inside immediately. We weren't allowed to go out even in front of our houses. There were shops with notices reading "Forbidden for Jews." There were special shops for Jews, but we didn't have notices on the doors of our house. There were people in Dubnica who were against Jews even before the war, but most of the people supported us. And here's another one. We got the message to leave Sofia on May 24th, 1943, and on the 25th or 26th, we were already on our way to Christiandale. There was not enough time to pack properly. We put only clothes and blankets into those 20 kilos of luggage. The officials sent us a message with the date and time we had to go to the railway station. People said we had to be assembled in different towns so that they could easily transport us to the Aegean region. The 11,000 Yugoslav Jews who were deported there had died. Meanwhile, there were many protests by the Bulgarian public against the deportation of Bulgarian Jews to Poland. A great part of the population protested. Religious organizations, the Bulgarian church leader, the Petardunov, who was very close to Tsar Boris III. More than 50 members of parliament signed a petition against the deportation of Bulgarian Jews to concentration camps in Poland, and that's how we were saved. So they were ready to be deported. This was not something that it was completely averted. We have an interview with the woman who they were waiting in they were ordered to go to their town square. They waited there all day and then they were sent home. This is not something that was averted sort of in the Houses of Parliament and didn't affect the Jews themselves. The Jews themselves were affected by this. And then we have examples of, we have testimonies of people who were in labor camps. So this man, Larry Angel, he talks about what it was like there, and he talks about how challenging the experience was. But he also talks about, if you see at the end here, he talks about how they used to meet up and they'd sing and play musical instruments and laugh. They would make their own theater performances and perform different arias from operas and operettas. Life was very, very hard. I'm not trying to portray it as easy. I just don't want to go through the whole quote here or excerpt here. But these experiences are complex, right? So you can say that Sephardic Jews, there was less maybe of a demonization of Jews than maybe in Northern Europe under Christians, but anti-Semitism is anti-Semitism and discrimination is discrimination. And even if it's better in one place than it is in another, it doesn't mean that people didn't experience this discrimination. So that's the example of the Bulgarian, the Holocaust. And we do have a film called Bulgarian, the Holocaust, where these events are a little laid out in a little bit more detail. If you're interested, I'm going to be sending you a follow-up email with links to everything I'm showing you tonight. And the second story is our story Survival in Sarajevo, which you saw a little bit of at the tail end of that first film, which is why I showed that film, even though I know I had asked you to, I put it in the list of possible films to watch. I wasn't sure if everyone was going to watch it, so I thought it was worth it to show that film, particularly since you can use it with your students. This story, Survival in Sarajevo, which I'm not going to show now, it's a 12-minute film. It goes into a lot more detail about how the Jews of Sarajevo organized their community. They saw 6 months ahead of time, before anyone else saw what was coming. They saw war coming, and they started to organize, and they started to reach out to Jewish organizations around the world. They stocked the city with 3 free pharmacies that anyone could get medication from. And as you saw in that clip, they worked together. They opened the synagogue to everyone. And the film Survival in Sarajevo ends with the story of 2 Muslims, a young boy and this woman, Zainab Hardaga, being taken to Israel on one of the caravans that were taken out of Sarajevo. During the siege of Sarajevo. There were many, many caravans sponsored by different organizations, and they got out of Sarajevo, and these people were able to go to Israel, these 2 Muslims. And Zainab Hardaga here was the first Muslim to receive a Righteous Gentile Award from Yad Vashem. And I'll talk a little bit more about her story in a minute. But the film we have, Survival in Sarajevo, is 12 minutes, really easy to use. And it's yet another example of civil society stepping up when governments fail. So you had the story of Bulgaria, you have the story of survival in Sarajevo. And then finally, what I want to show you is we have a Google Classroom, which I'm going to give you the link to. I'm going to get out of this PowerPoint very quickly. Let me stop sharing this. I'm going to stop sharing this and show you the Google Classroom so that you have access to all of the resources that we have about Sephardic Jews. Okay, give me 1 second here. There you go. So this is the Sephardic Jews in the Balkans Google Classroom I've created for anyone interested in using our resources. And give me 1 second here, and I'll just put here's the link to join it if you're interested. And when you get here, you basically should just go to classwork. And you can see I've put background materials such as that film we saw earlier, El Otro Camino. I've put the website that we have about the lost Sephardic world. I've put the primary source of the Edict of Expulsion from Spain, as well as several short articles from the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum about Sephardic Jews in different areas of the Balkans. I've created, we have activities in Spanish. If you're a history teacher or an English language arts teacher and want to do something about this topic, we've had teachers do something around Hispanic History Month, Hispanic Heritage Month, I think it's called, using Sephardic stories. We do have some of our resources in Spanish, and the ones that were translated are the activities that I created. I created basically, we call this a photo montage. I did this during COVID. And each of these photos of Sephardic Jews from different places, they're all hyperlinked. And then I have activities, including a worksheet where students, you put students in groups, and each student picks a different photo to look at. They click on the link, they read the description, they talk in their small group, they report back to their small group and answer questions together. So I have the worksheet here in Word and PDF. I put it in Word in case you want to change any of the questions. We have a packet that you can use that will basically collect all of the photos together. So these are the photos. Will take you to the page on the website with it. But so that you don't have to go look up all the photos yourself, I put them all in one document for you to use. So that you know what your students are reading. Oh, and the first page of this is anything that's hyperlinked has a film. So all these stories have all these people we have a personal story film for, and you can see which country they're from in the Balkans. So this section includes activity ideas and the resources you'll need for that. Then I have a whole section here specifically on survival in Sarajevo. It's its own unique resource and story. So we have lessons that people have used, an art lesson. This is a really interesting one where she takes pictures, and students really examine the photographs of that are from the Survival in Sarajevo story, which, by the way, photographs taken by the director and founder of Centropa, Ed Serrata. He was in Sarajevo during the Bosnian War. That's why we have that story. This is a wonderful lesson using the story too. This man used the lesson to teach about Reconstruction after the Civil War. So these are just creative ways teachers have used this story. And then I organized the rest of the Google Classroom according to country. So I downloaded, or I've put the links of specific people, and then especially if they have a film here, any relevant websites or lesson plans. Here's Bulgaria. Today I made a separate PDF of the quotes I have in the PowerPoint I was showing you, and actually there are several more quotes as well. And I'm going to put that PDF here under Bulgaria as well, Croatia, Greece, North Macedonia, Serbia, and Turkey. So these are all we like to make it one-stop shopping for you. And I started making these Google Classrooms during COVID in particular to help teachers as time has gotten more crunched for you. I think I want to just see what else I wanted to show you. I think that's it for the Sephardic Jews. I do want to share with you a few resources that we have for you as that we have for you as teachers. I hope you don't mind. I like to do that. So this is Zainab Hardaga, the person you saw, and this man is named Milton Wolff. Milton Wolff was the U.S. ambassador to Austria in the 1970s, but during the Bosnian War in the 1990s, he was the head of an organization called the American Jewish Joint Distribution Committee. It's known as the JDC. And he enabled Zainab Hardaga to take her entire family out of Sarajevo. She was given a pass to get out, but her family was not. And her daughter and son-in-law and granddaughter, I think a couple of them were ill. And he made it possible for them to get out. And this is them on the bus. But we have a student competition called the Milton Wolff Prize in Student Advocacy, which is funded by his daughters. And it's a really great project. Students love this. If one of the things we want to teach our students by showing them examples of civic action in history is to empower themselves to take civic action, this project really helps students do that. They identify a community problem. It can be a problem related to their school or their entire community or the nation. It can be racism, trash issues, homelessness, drug issues, LGBTQ, whatever they're interested in. They research why the topic is important. They find those who are helping to address this problem, local organizations, local individuals, whoever it is. They create a visual presentation, PowerPoint, video, Prezi, whatever. And then they have to go present. And yes, they can present to we hope they'll present to each other in the classroom or to their school or a club in the school, but we ask that they also present outside the school, maybe a Girl Scout club, a Girl Scout troop, or a church youth group, anywhere else to give them a little bit more higher profile in the community, to give them an opportunity to advocate for something that they're passionate about. Now, the thing about this project is that there are cash prizes for students. If you go to the fact page, you'll find all of the sort of requirements. But we have not only cash prizes for students, but let's see, I'm trying to find, here they are. We have 5 winning project cash prizes. We have 5 runner-up cash prizes. 3 schools will get a prize of $500, and students are able to figure out where they want to donate. You have to donate that funding to one of the organizations, preferably that students did their research on. And we also have scholarships for 2 teachers to join us next summer in Berlin for our summer academy, which is the next thing I'll tell you about. Every summer we bring teachers to the great cities of Central Europe, and next summer we'll bring teachers to Berlin, as you can see here. We'll bring probably 60 to 65 teachers from about 15 countries. It's a really wonderful way to learn history. If you haven't traveled, we'll visit the sites that Jews walked on in Berlin. We'll visit the Jewish community. We'll not only go to the former Jewish neighborhood of Berlin, but we'll read Centropa excerpts and stand in front of the places that our interviewees told us about where they lived in Berlin. We'll see his other historic sites. I'm pretty sure we're going to go to the concentration camp Ravensbrück next summer. And we also, of course, sometimes we'll talk about Cold War history, and really all of 20th century history is in Berlin. So if you're interested in this, please feel free to let me know. Applications will be available in January. And one way to get your trip funded is to do the Milton Wolf Prize with your classes. And then the only other things I wanted to kind of share with you are a couple, is that next week we have, this Sunday, wait, what's today? Yes, this coming Sunday, we have our Cafe Centropa Teachers Edition, which started during COVID. I really wanted to see what we could offer teachers during COVID. Remember that isolation? Remember how everyone was overwhelmed? And one of the things Centropa offers US teachers is an international teacher network. The trip to Berlin, the best part about it is really getting to know teachers in other countries, particularly teachers who teach about the Holocaust in the lands where the Holocaust took place. That will change your perspective forever, and you'll get to bring that back to your students. Anyway, I thought to myself, what can we offer teachers during COVID? And so we started a Cafe Centropa Teachers Edition. We meet about every 6 weeks. We alternate Saturdays and Sundays. We have to meet on the weekend because we're spanning California time and Israel time. And teachers from all over just get on, and it's no work. It's all just, maybe we'll show you a new resource. Sometimes I do that. But basically, I put you in breakout rooms, randomly put you in breakout rooms with teachers from other places, and you talk about whatever you want. And we'll do 2 breakout sessions, 30 minutes each. So that our next one is this coming Sunday, December 10th. We hope to see you there, no pressure. It's a very nice way to meet teachers in other countries. And we also do have programs where teachers create projects together. So your students can be working with teachers in Israel, Ukraine, North Macedonia, Croatia. We've had many successful projects that way. And you're going to talk about civics, creating civic mindedness, global awareness, having students meet students from other countries is really a great way to do it. So I think that's everything. I will be sending you a follow-up email with links to everything, the films, everything from today. You have most of everything on that Google Classroom. I hope you join and use it at any point. And I see there's a question, is there a schedule for future cafe sessions? Not yet. I just scheduled them till December. So I'm going to, this week or next, I'll be scheduling for next year. But I will have your email addresses after tonight, and we'll be sure to let you know about the upcoming Cafe Centropa in 2024. I'd be happy to hear any questions or any comments or whatever. And I am your resource. Like, we do have so many resources for teachers, and I know them pretty well. I've been doing this now 13 years. So I'm happy to be the person that finds the resource you need. So, because I know you probably don't have time to do that. So I just want to thank Sarah and Adara, thank Rich, and I'll stop talking now.
Thank you, Lauren. If we could give a reaction or, a round of applause, because we are just so thankful for your time and for all of the Google Classroom. I'm blown away by that. That was incredible. So thank you for just building that and for sharing it with everyone. That's going to be such a remarkable resource. We are going to open the floor to questions. So if you have questions, please feel free to unmute yourself. I didn't see any in the chat. So please go ahead and ask your questions. I hope you hear my daughter in the background asking for Bluey, so Can you discuss the founding of Centropa, where the idea came from, and the funding?
Oh, the funding is always a challenge, but sure, I kept that out just because of time. But the man who's currently the director, he's a nice Jewish boy from Savannah, Georgia, and he came across a book series of Central European literature edited by Philip Roth. And he just fell in love with it, and he sold his business and decided to become a photojournalist, and his photos are fantastic. If anyone teaches the Cold War, the fall of communism, Google Edward Serrata and look for his photographs in 1989 or something like that, and look for his photographs. They're beautiful photographs, but he decided to go to Central Europe and find the last Jews of Central and Eastern Europe, and he just fell in love with it, and he moved there. And he always says that the real stories happened when he put his camera away, and the elderly Jews would invite him home to their the wallpaper falling off the wall apartments, and they'd open their photo albums and just regale him with stories. And then he'd go back to say hi to them, and they were passing away, they were dying. And then he met two young Hungarian Jewish women in their 20s. They had little babies and toddlers. And they said, our grandparents did all of those testimonies, video testimonies about their experiences during the Holocaust, but that's not the only thing we want them to know about their great-grandparents. So he thought about it. He'd done some video. He hated working with video. He said, do they have stories? They said, do they have stories? He said, do they have photographs? He said, yes. And he just started to create an organization, and he created a whole protocol that interviewers had to follow, and he created teams in all of these countries, and he brought in oral history expert, and he really did it's a remarkable archive. It really is. I mean, I work for Centropa, but I can never quite get over that. So that's how it started. And in terms of funding, we're constantly asking for support to continue doing what we do. Our European programs tend to get grants from the European Union, maybe the German Foreign Ministry. There are a lot of organizations there that support civic. For example, they're very interested in helping teachers in Moldova or Croatia or the Balkans be able to tell the stories, the Holocaust stories from there to their students. So I hope I didn't talk too long. I know it's a little bit over, but that's how we got started. And our funding in the US is often Family Foundation funding. So if you know of anyone who wants to support Jewish stories, let us know.
Thank you. No, that was a very nice answer to the question. I think that helps a lot. Lauren, I know that whether they're asking it or not, I know there are going to be teachers interested in the trip. So can you talk a little bit more about, what the 2 weeks looks like, the funding, how teachers have paid for it in the past, expectations, etc.?
Sure, great question. So the trip I think is 7 days this year. And basically we actually try and find funding. We do, because we know teachers don't really have the money. We think it's about the price has gone up quite a bit since COVID. We just got hotel prices and they're more than they've ever been. But we estimate about $5,000 for a trip, and that includes airfare. So like I said, I do try and raise the money, and we do have some funding for teachers in the greater MetroWest area, for I think a few teachers. We do ask teachers to pay a few things: a registration fee, which is we may have to ask for $125 this year. We ask you to get to and from the airports on your own. And then there are going to be evenings where you have free evenings in Berlin, and then you would pay for your meals. And then also we ask for you to cover travel, medical insurance in case something happens. So that probably adds up to a few $100s, but that's what we do. And I'm always looking for people to help fund teachers. And a lot of it depends on where you live. It just is how the funding works. People want to fund teachers in their own community. So that's why I was really pleased to be able to get two fellowships for the Milton Wolf Prize, because that means you can be from anywhere. And if I don't have a funder from you for someone in your area, then I can, and you've done a really great job with the Milton Wolf project and really, invested in it, then I can use one of those fellowships for people who do that.
Great, thank you. I know that the HRC is also planning a trip to Europe this summer. We're going to Poland in early August, and Taylor Swift is going to be in Poland at the same time, and she's causing the prices, to different. So, we're totally, we understand that. But thank you. That was a great summary. Any other questions? All right. Well, Lauren, I hope you had a chance to look in the chat, because everyone is just so appreciative of you and your time tonight and the resources. So thank you. This was a lovely presentation. Again, I want to thank Jewish Federation of Greater Metro West, their Holocaust Council, and the Center for Holocaust and Genocide Education at St. Elizabeth University for their co-sponsorship. Lauren, Centropa, you do this every year for us, and we are so thankful. It is such a beautiful partnership. All of the educators, for taking time tonight. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Now go enjoy the rest of your evening, and we'll all be in touch soon. Have a great night, everyone.
Thank you.